Thank you very much for joining us. This is The Economy with me, Ibrahim Sani. I am back in the studio because right now joining me this afternoon are two authors of the very recently debated and discussed report called Searching for the Poor and Middle Class in Malaysia. Very recently, the government, specifically the Ministry of Economy, has outlined that the T15 classification vis-a-vis the T20, M40, B40 classification is currently being looked at. We need to understand what constitutes as a person that has high disposable income, basically who's rich, who's poor, how do we better target subsidies and the like. So this report basically sheds more light into how one can pursue such a topic. Joining me on my left are two very distinguished individuals, Suraya Ismail, the Director of Research at KRI, or the Khazanah Research Institute, and to her left is Gregory Ho, the Research Associate, also from KRI. Maybe Dr. Suraya will do the whole overview in terms of is this report nullifying the whole notion of what the government is saying? What people are trying to say is, are you disproving that the classification of T20, M40, B40 notion is outdated, outmoded, and you are now providing something better? Or is it more nuanced than that?
Thank you, Ibrahim, for that really interesting question, big question, and thank you for having us on this show of yours. If I were to become more direct of what we're trying to do is, for all this while, in order to understand society from an economic base, from an economic stratification, is what we call the demarcation of households following their income, which is the B40, the M40, the T20. This was created by the World Bank back in the 70s when they were looking into certain developing countries after the colonial experience. Who is the B40 in, say, South Africa? Who is the B40, say, in other parts of Africa continent? And after that, that has been some sort of a way in which they compare countries. Now, this method looks into an income demarcation. So, say for example, in Malaysia, there's about 9 million households now. So you line them up, B40, put a line there, M40, put a line there, and T20. But for us, when we look into this demarcation, we think that sometimes, in order to group people together, what are the parameters or what are the standardized parameters that you could really group them together? What is that uniform characteristics? So when we look into both income, so this is what we've brought forward into this discussion, is that surely, where you are in the scheme of standard of living shouldn't just be pegged on income. It should be on what can you do with that income. So that is the real thing that we brought into, the real, I think, innovation that we brought into the discussion, which is to put income and expenditure together. So
you're saying whether or not we're using it for servicing loans versus discretionary spending, is that what you're trying to get at? What we do with our income?
What we can afford with our income. That would then create the standard of living.
What can we afford with our income? So somebody can have, I don't know, 20,000 a month. What can they afford? Might not be a lot.
Yeah, because in here we also use equalized income, meaning household per capita as well. How many households are there? The number of households, the number of person in the household as well. So
how is this different from disposable income?
Oh, but this is it. Whatever you can consume is your disposable income.
But isn't this exactly what the Ministry of Economy specifically is postulating? The measurement of the disposable income per household, not just the income per se or the revenue of the household per se.
So, what is the point of the Ministry of Economy? Ministry
of Income? Let's have one now. Let's have one now. Yeah.
It's because they want to see what is the cut-off point for subsidies. We are not doing this income distribution for that. We are trying to understand who are the poor relatively and who are the middle class in our country. But this is different,
but
objective.
It's certainly not mutually exclusive, isn't it?
It's not mutually exclusive.
So let's go back a few years into the past. At around 2015, we have this B40, M40, and T20 classification. So we were interested to examine whether this is the right classification to use to classify households. If you want to call B40 households, B40 for the longest time was used as a shorthand to call households poor, right? But are they really poor? So we wanted to examine, with the amount of money with the amount of income that you're earning, what are the types of goods and services that you can afford to purchase with that income? So this is in essence the framework that we have undertaken in this study, so our results show the distribution of what households can purchase with how much they can afford, and that's why we recommended a different
but to what
demarcation.
end, right?
Wait. Before that, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Wait. So we can't equate the B40 to the poor. We can't equate the M40 as a middle class, because even then, they are saying with this classification, the P40 is the poor, the M40 is the middle class. And what are the characteristics of the middle class? It's not mentioned. But if you look at what is the characteristics of a middle class, it's not the same as middle income. Middle class, if you look at the literature and why government really wants to create a middle class, is because they are the one who pushes aggregate demand. They are strong. They are the one that can insulate from financial shocks. So if you have more middle class people in our country, it's better. Following the old classification, M40 and T20 are 60%. We are assuming that our people, 60% are of middle class types. This is wrong. So our research, research is saying, no, this is wrong. This is the wrong thing to say.
I guess because the word M40 has the word middle in it, so it's easy to think that, oh, this is the middle class. But here we are trying to identify what makes you a middle class, right? The characteristics that is in the middle class all over the world.
Let's go down to brass tacks. What constitutes a person of being a middle class?
So in our research, we looked at the literature from developing countries, and what makes you a middle class is if you're able to sort of insulate yourself from adverse economic risks. So we look at things whether households are able to purchase insurance policies. Do they consult tax consultants? Do they have personal helpers at home? Okay. Are you able to free up your time to invest in your own social mobility? Like, do you take extra lessons on your free time? Okay. We look at these types of expenditure and where they are present in the distribution of households in Malaysia.
And the findings have shown that?
And the findings have shown that the M40 is not the middle class. In fact, the middle class would be in the T30.
Only.
T30 only.
Yep.
So 30% of the population of Malaysia is considered as middle class based on this very sensible, rational argumentation of whether or not you can protect yourself from financial shocks and perhaps have some discretionary expenditure.
Yes, and
invest in your social mobility.
Invest in social mobility. So this
anak-anak boleh pergi ballet lesson or tuition lessons.
Okay.
You see that.
Upskilling oneself, perhaps getting postgraduate degrees.
Yes.
So only 30%.
Yeah.
Okay. Then where is the issue here? Because the headlines are shouting that your reports are saying that Kementerian Economy is finding it different one way and you guys are nullifying that report. Is there any truth in the headlines?
Let's look at it this way. We are saying when Kementerian Economy brings the B40, M40, T20, they do it on a calculation based on the World Bank, which is income only.
Yeah, but they have said that they're moving away from it, no?
Okay. Now, when they are moving away from it, we are now coming out with a new method. So our new method is saying, don't just look at income, look at expenditure, and have a category that says what is the middle class. And then, in terms of who are the poor, we have some measures already. These are those who are in basic needs category. Yeah. Aspirational is within the T30. Yeah. Now, then the other thing is that, why does it matter? That's this question, right? I mean,
subsidy lah. Around 95. It matters.
I tell you,
I would like to argue that I don't want to be in the T30. I want to be in the B 70.
So that dapatlah duit. Okay, wait. Adakah? Okay, this is another thing I don't understand. why do we use the distribution as the final arbiter for getting benefits? Because the thing is, kalau you bayar tax, pakai distribution, gila kita semua. We have a system whereby we isi borang, we tell them what we have, and therefore we pay taxes. It's the same things as a benefit. For me, this whole idea that you can actually say that this group gets it, this group does not get it, in terms of demarcation lines, so what? If you're $1 above, tak dapat dah. $1 below, dapat. It's for me nonsensical. What distribution in all around the world, what we do with distribution analysis is to understand economic stratification. So when we do big policies, we say, okay, di kita ada B20 and 50 yang orang kata experiencing trade-off. Apa maksud experiencing trade-off? Kalau duit lebih, ni kita buat 2019, duit lebih makan KFC. Aka pula duit lebih makan KFC kan? That shows there's a problem. So now we know, oh, our M50 is like that. It's not strong. So when we actually do policies, apa-apa je lah, bukan saja round 15. T15, round 15.
Round 15 go back on.
Round 15, habis round 15. We shouldn't. I'm sorry to say, we shouldn't look at it that way in terms of classification, because classification is a signal, it's a gauge. Like, okay, should we do it? Should we do it when we see a distribution like this?
Well, but we know that our tax base is narrow. We know that only something like 20% of us pay income tax anyway. So we're looking at 80% of people not even qualifying that 2,500 ringgit threshold of income. We're also looking at young people being exempted from paying income tax because they don't even belong in the first bracket. So there is an issue of disposable income, especially for young Malaysians. And then, of course, when you split this with towns, regions, states and wilayahs, you're going to get a far greater discrepancy between KL, Selangor, JB versus the rest. And even within KL, Selangor and KL, it's not necessarily the same. I mean, you can stay in Hulu, Selangor, and you can stay in PJ. You can have two vastly different lifestyle. But this is common across all markets around the world. So how do you approach this? Because one of the things that you mentioned in your report is that, number one, you want to show that flawed traditional classifications exist. This much, everybody kind of agrees. Even the government or private sector or you guys, everybody agrees. Then, of course, there's the new classification based on expenditure returns and that, or patterns. And that new classification, you're mentioning that maybe the middle class is T30. So that 70% also has to be untangled. The whole notion of $2 above per day, abject poverty versus what constitutes as poor. And of course, with poor, there's a lot of stratification in terms of what poor means. Again, to what end? Because you're right, I kind of agree. I'm already paying taxes. There are items where it precludes me from getting benefits, but at the same time, I'm already getting it through my form of paying the tax. I get that. But at the same time, cash handouts universally agreed to help those that are perhaps need help in their poorer stations in life, and that helps them better because they know how to best spend the cash. So does this report help that kind of idea? To what end are we getting this whole report entangled into?
So basically, in terms of looking at the B20, so let's look at the B20. When we look into poverty, it's not in a vacuous context. So whatever injection one should have is based through the case worker that the welfare department would see and look at them. So it's very comprehensive. It's very comprehensive. So when you look at household at the granular level, there are other means or other ways in which people can help them. Now, when you look at the cash transfer, so this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. It is quite useful. This one is quite useful at that national level. So who would get it? So for us now, it could be all the way to B70. So, but the point of the matter is, what we're trying to show is that there are other deprivations in terms of what people can afford. For example, in the M50, let's go to some of the findings we found.
Just to clarify, M50 doesn't mean that they belong in the middle class. They are vulnerable households between the brackets of bottom 20 and top 30.
Yes.
Yeah, they're not middle class.
No.
Yes.
So, for example, we found out that if they want to, katalah balik kampung, tayar dua pecah tak boleh buat apa, tak boleh balik kampung. So how can you say all these people to begin with tak boleh dapat cash transfer? That's one. And number two, why is our income that low? So this sort of analysis is meant to look at many things, many objectives. Now, but if you still want to say, oh, is this the way for us to then carve out the B40 to give them aid? I think there would be more comprehensive database that needs to be put up, and the government is doing that. But for us to really understand that, look, before we say that the middle class and the strong household in our country is 40 plus 20, 60%. When you think about that, 40% not so good, 60% very good, it means different connotation to what we are. But when we put this up and say, based on evidence, it is B20, M50, maknanya B70 lah. I always say that. But if I start saying B70, orang cakap, we are all bottom. No, there is a middle income, M50, but not middle class. Then you would say, oh, 70% are not very good, only 30% are good. So then you do the calculation at the national level.
Yeah, but who's saying that our T60 or M60 is doing well? I don't think
that's
anybody.
That's in the aspirational document from the 9th Malaysian Plan sampai sekarang.
The 9th Malaysian Plan, and of course, we're at the cusps of RFK 13 as well.
Yes, of course, times have changed, but in the past, it used to be the case where if you're in the M40 group, you do not have access to any government assistance, because back then B40 was used as a sole indicator for whether or not one receives aid. So I guess Dr. Suraya's point is also that when you are trying to decide who gets what forms of subsidy or aid, it should be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, and the analysis must go much deeper than just how much you earn or where you are in the distribution of things.
I mean, I used to use this example all the time. My mom bought a house in Damansara Utama in the 70s for 120,000. That's crazy. Today, I don't know, certainly not 120,000 lah. Dad bought a house in Taman Tun in the 80s for 200,000. So collectively, they own a 350,000 ringgit property that is easily 10 times that. Very silly of them to sell those properties, early on in their life. But any young Malaysian who aspires to be a house owner can never dream of owning such a house. And then, of course, with the organization that I work with, the people that I employ, I'm particularly saddened at the rate of salary that the company can give, because for a person with a 5-year experience, 29 to 30 years old, the average is about 4,000 to 6,000. That's about the range that we're looking at, and they work in KL. That's crazy, and it's not unique. It's crazy that they earn little. It's scary because it's not unique. So of course the government, at least under this administration, is trying their best on how to have progressive wages, trying to have income to be a big policy in their economic framework, especially for the RMK 13.
Yep.
So are they on the right track in terms of looking at the right places and building policies for those areas? Or do you think that it's still kind of misfire in terms of what they're looking at?
No, I think progressive wages is the reason why it's a good way in which we should then propel income. Because another study that KRI did was we demonstrated that wage stagnation has been going on for the bottom 50% of population. So it kind of corroborate with this study, whereby for the past 10 years, income in absolute figures naik lebih kurang about $60 per year for
real income growth.
Real income, yeah, for the past 10 years. This is, oh yeah, you were in that study. Sorry, wage stagnation is really happening now. When we go to the private sector and we say, why are you not paying a lot, or why are you not paying their gaji wajar? First thing they say, they slap onto you is that, oh, productivity tak naik.
Yeah, of course. That's the normal go-to
but when you
excuse.
But you're paying too low to begin with. That's one. And if you look at all the literature in the whole world, good payment, gaji wajar, is the way in which it is a source of productivity. That is how people think about it. That's another thing we want to bring to the Malaysian public now, is that you got to think differently. Because
but a good economist would argue that market equilibrium kind of solve itself if I'm You know, if I deserve to be paid 15,000, I'll go to a market that can pay me 15,000 and everything is solved by itself.
So that economies of yours might be not looking at, basically there are distortions in the market. And there will never be a perfect information market because sekarang we don't have workers' rights, we don't have unions. We banned them in the 80s, right? So the negotiation power is not there. That's why government masuk ni, progressive wage, which we applaud, because there must be a strong force that nudges the private sector to understand that these wages are stagnating and are low.
Yeah, okay, fine. It's nice to have a government policy, but private sector still behaves in a private commercial manner. They can adopt it. Unless it's enforced, they're not going to be compelled to do it. So where do you see policy enactment taking place? Do you think that government must now institute not just, I think in the budget recently, the Prime Minister and Finance Minister was announcing not just minimum wage, but of course basic wages for specific professions, if you remember correctly.
Yes.
Is that enforceable? Can they now say that fresh grad for, let's say, engineer must be paid certain amount or else, I don't know, penalty?
Kita berharap lah. Because, I mean, this must come from the private sector. But if you have a wage stagnation for the past 10 years, and nobody bats an eyelid, sebenarnya, nobody's doing anything, and this government is trying to do something, this is something that should be done. And at the same time, we've never had that penalty. We've always been nudging them, like, bagi dia 6 bulan grant. Imagine to give them a grant to give for workers.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the nice way of giving the carrot.
Well, there's always a carrot and a stick. So now it's not just a carrot, it's a carrot cake now.
Yeah, I would imagine that the private sector would also want to pay workers a decent wage. And that would be a competitive move, actually, in my opinion.
20 minutes now. That is the most optimistic statement that has been said so far. Because I have a completely different view, Greg. Sure. I think that corporates will always maximize shareholder value. And if it means not increasing wage line on their P&L, they will not do it. And if they look at attrition as a source of maintaining the objective, they will. Because as far as I'm concerned, I have a wage budget that I will meet. If it means attrition, so be it. If I need to rehire, I'll hire other people at lower wages. That is begging for this kind of job. That's a very pessimistic view of looking at things, but I feel that I'm a realist on this topic. So until and unless a compulsion and compelling takes place, I don't think the corporate sector, the private sector is going to take place. Okay, final argumentation before we conclude our conversation is on market forces. We tend to argue that we have a lot of, I think 93% of businesses as SMEs and the like. You know, Adam Smith would like to argue that things would coalesce, people would go out of market, businesses would amalgamate to make themselves stronger. Is this theory taking place? Because I see a lot more smaller businesses mushrooming, and many of them are below 5 packs per employee, and none of them are growing, and it's stagnating. So not only are wages stagnating, business is also stagnating, let alone the workers within those businesses. Is that something that you're looking at now?
Can I have a go first? Okay. So your first question, your previous question, and this question are basically two sides of the coin. One is the wages. One is basically firm owners. So let's just start this with a very, I suppose, a statement. Is that we have a lousy private sector. Agreed. We have a lousy private sector or owners of capital. We have people who actually don't believe in progressive wages. They don't believe that workers should be compensated. That's why the word compensation tak keluar, their wages. Compensation means yes.
Compensated lah. I feel compensated.
Because you are bringing something to your firm and they don't value you for that. Now, the point of the matter is it also shows that there's no such thing as a market, because this is a producer's market whereby they can take whatever prices that they give us in terms of goods and services, and they can give whatever wages they want to give us. So it's very lopsided to owners of capital. So this is a real structural problem. Now, even when we look at a place where there's so many countries that has 5 or 3 what we call very innovative types of SMEs running around in other parts of the world, but they value their workers. And don't forget, ini bukan cerita baru. 200 tahun dahulu, Henry Ford with the car industry said that if I pay my workers higher, they can purchase my cars. And then boom, naik semua benda. Tu orang ada otak. Ini bila orang tak ada otak, dia tak tahu yang if you don't give good wages, that's why we wanted the middle class. You can, it's a straw and you demand, you beli barang mahal. When you can afford to buy barang mahal, everything, as a circular economy, it goes well. You pay good wages, they can really take sophisticated punya barang and goods and services, and that is the whole loop. Now, masalahnya sekarang, yes, it starts with that owners of capital. Tak faham tu. Jadi mungkin awareness kita ialah, you panggil semua owners of capital, come here cakap kenapa tak buat ni.
So, in conclusion, I don't see much discrepancy between your report versus what the Ministry of Economy is trying to do. But at the same time, the way the media is playing it out is as if it's a binary situation. Either somebody is saying the wrong thing, or one person is practically pandering to the gallery. Everybody is arguing that wages is a key issue. We're looking at policies on increasing wages through progressive wage. We're also looking at how assistance, whether cash transfer or even tax breaks, can be better allocated. But the bottom line, basically, so to speak, based on your report, we have a bottom 20, a struggling or vulnerable household of 50, and a middle class of 30. So who's rich? Like rich? Like I can go to Venice on my private jet. Like what is the... Is it like a Bernie Sanders moment, like 0.001% kind of thing?
So this is actually a problem in the literature as well. It's actually very difficult to classify a person as rich. To classify a person as poor, you just look at their characteristics or their
deprivations. I can go to Venice for lunch and then back in KL for dinner.
Yeah, so sembang je lah. I used to think that in order for you to be rich, right, you should have a private pool only for your household.
Yeah.
That's rich, right?
Yeah.
Would you say that a person who can afford a Tesla is rich?
No.
Not necessary, isn't it?
No.
There are certainly...
I have a colleague, he owns a Tesla, he's riddled with debt.
There you go. Yeah, so how do you take their expenditure pattern and use that to determine whether they are rich? Certainly we have to look at assets.
Yes, correct.
No, it's very difficult for us to sort of have data on who owns what.
Well, there is this thing called asset declaration that politicians are supposed to do. So there's that. But yes, Greg, sorry.
So in my opinion, it may be the case that the rich, depending on your definition, could either be 1% or 5%. I don't know. I am leaning more to 1%. But no one really knows.
Because we don't have data on assets, itu je, the wealth. Because when we talk about rich, then we have to look at wealth. Wealth must be the stocks they are the assets they are
No, because when you rich look at asset, when you look at, what was it, income, you look at what you can afford with the income.
Yeah, itu level kita sekarang dekat M50 tu.
Yeah.
So as you move from middle class to rich, it becomes about getting exclusive stuff, right?
Yeah.
Stuff that not everybody
can get.
Restrictive lah. That's why you have to look at the assets lah.
So I nak tambah sikit sebab orang pun cakap kan, aspirational bukan rich.
Yeah.
Aspirational ni ada juga aspirational dia hantar anak pergi tuition segala macam Tesla. But they're not rich. That's why when we say middle class, because we didn't even go to the rich. The rich ni kita bukan kita letak apa? What do you call this? Quote unquote juga who's rich kan in our views kan. Sebab the data does not permit it to begin with. And then secondly, aspirational, middle class dengan rich, kalau orang putih upper class lah. The bourgeoisie, the ruling class. And that also infers they have land. They have tons of shop houses that gets rent income. Ini semua orang kaya. But
the monopoly landowner kind of idea.
Yes. Yeah. And this is out of our what we are doing here. Like ini orang kata government like HDN lah kot kena cari kan.
Yeah. Final question to the both of you. What's next following this report? Is this a checkpoint report or to a larger idea?
This is actually the first report that we are pushing out in order to clear up this discussion about what it means to be poor, what it means to be aspirational class or middle class. We are working to write another report that looks at how these attributes are different across geography and how they might require a different sort of thinking depending on where you are. But that's a conversation for a later date, I guess.
And I was thinking of retirement savings would be another conversation for another day, because that is, of course, a big topic for Malaysia and beyond. But right for now, that is the conversation that we have had with Khazanah Research Institute. That was, you just heard from Gregory Ho, the Research Associate at Khazanah Research Institute, as well as earlier on you heard from Dr. Suraya, the Director of Research at KRI. If you want to learn more about the report, just head on to Khazanah Research Institute website at, what was it? KRI Institute, KRInstitute.org. Yes. Jen keeps on saying, when you say KRI Institute, it's ridiculous. Until then, thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next one.